Mazel Tov to the yeshiva, Rabbi Wagner, 25 years. Wow!
25 years ago, the Rabbi guided the footsteps of myself and my family to Toronto to rebuild the yeshiva. Since then, any small part that we were able to play in the tremendous results that we were able to witness over the years, Bachrim and learning Torah, Bachrim growing in their Chassidishkeit, was the biggest incomparable schus.
There's always a part of my neshama and my heart that's in Yeshivas Lubavitch, Toronto. Those years had a dramatic impact on my personal life and obviously in the way I deal with my Talmidim.
The halls and the rooms of the yeshiva are places where lives are changed, lives are formed, where minds and hearts are molded, where Torah, where Yiras Shamayim, and where the Rebbe comes to life.
The Gemara tells us that when the great tzaddik Rabbi Akiva came home, he met his wife, and his Talmidim didn't know who she was, and they wanted to push her away. And he told his Talmidim that my Torah and your Torah is really her Torah, her schus. In all honesty and fully from me'oimek halev, I want to say to our Rabbi Akiva that my Torah and the Torah of our Talmidim and their Hatzlacha, that's really all his.
If sie haben eine Idee, was so was mir soll tun mit Geld, was kann wegen nach verschiedene Sachen sollen sie machen mit seinem Verschließen und tun alles, was hängt ab und sie. Als Gedimo, bewaschene Hamedina Priority soll gehen nach Education, wenn wir uns das da nach Erziehen. In Niedigkeit, in Emes Niedigkeit, was sie
The chinuch that I got by Rabbi Wagner, dedication and care that each individual offered, and this is something that I try on a daily basis to impart in my community.
We have to move on and provide for the Bachrim, Bigashmis and Beruchnis, the proper setting and the proper atmosphere for them to continue the amazing and unimaginable growth that we have witnessed until now. That should go to new scales and new dimensions.
When we give tzedakah today, it will help the yeshiva go on to do the much needed renovations, and definitely will be an added schus to bring a refuah shlema to our yeshiva, which will further continue to teach us and farbrengen with us and bring the yeshiva to new levels.
His total dedication, devotion to our chinuch really inspired us. It gave us a starkheit being a Yid, a starkheit of being a Chassid, a starkheit of our emunah. These Yesodis, which are our entire Ashkafas HaChaim, were all miyusim, and we all nurtured in Toronto.
I merited to be there at the inception of the yeshiva when it first moved into its current facility, and now Yeshivas Lubavitch Toronto is preparing to enter phase 2.0, to take the next leap, to open new horizons. Please support this bold initiative.
A wusse do a dollar macht von dem Tzedakah und geht das ab auf a Yeshiva und auf a Schule und auf arme Leid.
L'chaim u'lebracha, tzchav dalet teves, tzayim skula, kol maisa v'avidasa yasher avad of the Alter Rebbe, arpeil Yeshuas bekerev haaretz. So the first thing, l'chaim, everybody who needs a Yeshua, Yigashmius, or in Ruchnius, or in any area, should be nimshach from the Yom Zakai of Chavdalet Teves, from the Peil Yeshuas, Bekerev Haaretz, Yeshuas, B'chal HaMitzdarech, B'teva Nireh V'Hanigla, in the way of Ad Meheira Yoretz Tvarei, L'chaim U'Lebracha. It's Chavdalet Teves. I'll start off with a story of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe had a chassid, was a young man. He used to learn in the Chadarim of the Alter Rebbe. And at some point, after it passed a certain amount of years after his chasana, so he had to start going into business to support his family. So he became a seicher. He would buy merchandise and sell it, and do this, try to bring in money for his livelihood. One day he was traveling. It was before the Yom Tov of Shavuos, and the young man was traveling with a wagon full of schera, full of merchandise that he was going to sell. And on the way he's thinking and he's reminiscing and reminding himself how in earlier years, in this time of the year, he would be traveling to Liyazhne, he would be going to the Alter Rebbe for Yom Tov, to spend a Yom Tov in a Maimedu Matzav Meroimim, in an elevated state, together with the Rebbe, together with his fellow Chassidim. And now here it's before Yom Tov, he's completely busy with thinking about money, thinking about selling and buying, and mundane matters as far, Kirchek Mizrach Mimayrav, as far as could be from his earlier state, the way he was by the Alter Rebbe. And the more he's thinking about it, the more it's negeya lelibei, the more it's bothering him and disturbing him, till it comes to the point that he just can't handle it anymore. He leaves his wagon sitting in the middle of the street, and he runs away to Liyazhne, to the Alter Rebbe. And he spends Yom Tov by the Alter Rebbe, elevated Yom Tov, a matzav meroimim, forgets about everything. After Yom Tov, he goes into Yechidus. And in Yechidus, he has to again ask about his physical, mundane needs, his livelihood, his family. Comes into Yechidus, he reminds himself about his wagon that he left a few days ago. So when he comes into Yechidus, the Alter Rebbe says to him, don't worry, your wagon is standing complete where you left it. You're not going to lose anything. You'll have no damage from this incident. But the Alter Rebbe sees that he's still standing there and he's still not happy, he's not satisfied, not at peace. So the Alter Rebbe asked him, "Was is?" So he said to the Alter Rebbe that this is not a life. His whole life is spent, all his days are spent running after money, running after another transaction, another business deal, and he misses the life that he used to have when he was able to sit b'sheves tachkimuni, sit ala teira v'alaveda, sit and learn and daven, and he can't manage. He feels he's yearning for it strongly. So the Alter Rebbe advised him, buy a krechma, buy an inn, and your wife will run the inn and take care of the business side of it. You'll have to go twice a year to replenish the supplies, and the rest of the time you'll sit ala teira v'alaveda, so you'll be able to live the lifestyle that's so important to you, that means so much to you. Fine. So the chassid accepted the suggestion, and as he's coming back to the place where he left his wagon in the street, from the distance he sees a paritz standing in the other side of the street and looking at his wagon in puzzlement and wonderment. And he gets closer, and the paritz sees him walking towards the wagon, and the paritz comes over to him, and he says, "Excuse me, I noticed this wagon sitting here already for a few hours, full of merchandise. No one seems to be watching it. Is this your wagon? It's very strange." So the chassid laughs. He says, "A few hours?" He says, "The wagon is sitting over here already a few days, exactly the way you see it." So the paritz is shocked. He says, "How could that be?" So he told him the whole story, that he ran to his Rebbe, and his Rebbe promised him that the wagon will stand b'shleimus, will not be missing anything. So the paritz says to him, "Listen, I see that you're an honest man. I own a krechma, I own an inn. I'm ready to rent it out to you for a very, very good price. And I trust you, you'll make a good living off it. The chassid says, that sounds amazing, I'd love to rent a kretschmer. That was what the Alter Rebbe had advised him. But he said, right now, I'm tight for money. My business hasn't been doing that well lately, and I don't have the money to rent a kretschmer, this liquid funds available. Especially since he skipped a business trip and he ran to Liazna instead in the middle. So the parrot said to him, don't worry, I see that you're an honest person. I'll give it to you for the first few months on credit, and I trust you, and I'm sure you'll do well, and you'll pay me back when you have the money. The chassid was overjoyed because the Alter Rebbe had just told him to do this. It's mamish ad meheira yaretz devarei. Immediately he's finding the fulfillment of the advice and the words of the Alter Rebbe. And the chassid agrees, and he says he sends for his family. He picks up his family on the way, and he goes to where this parrot had his kretschmer. As he gets closer, so the Yidden who lived in the neighborhood see a Jew coming. They go over to him and they wish him shalom aleichem, and they greet him, and they ask him, "What are you doing over here?" He said he's coming to be the new person to run the kretschmer of the parrot. So they said to him, "Wait. Stop, you have better think twice before you do that." They told him, in this neighborhood there's some mechashves, there's witches, kishif machers, women who practice witchcraft, and they have something against this kretschmer, and every new innkeeper that comes is not moitzi shnase. He doesn't survive the year, so it's not a good idea for you. It might be a good financial deal, but it's not good for your health. The chassid hears what they're saying. Obviously, he becomes very frightened. But then he says, this is what the Alter Rebbe told me to do. My Rebbe told me to get a kretschmer. And right afterwards, this became available. I'm sure nothing bad is going to happen to me because of that. And he went and he took over the kretschmer. It went by not a long time, a few months, and the chassid started feeling weakened. He started feeling ill health. And he realized that this is the work of the mechashves, of these women practicing the witchcraft. It went by more time, and the chassid is getting weaker. He's continuously weakening to the point that he was bedridden. He couldn't get out of bed. And he said to himself, I better go very, very quickly to the Alter Rebbe, to Liazna, before it's going to be too late. I won't be able to travel anymore. But I need to get his help and his defense against this situation. So he went to Liazna. This was Shabbos Kodesh Pashas Bullock. And he got there Friday afternoon, and he went straight to his achsanya. He went straight to the place where he would be staying, because he was so weakened by his health that he couldn't even, Friday night he didn't go to shul. He just davened at home. Shabbos morning he went to shul, and he went straight to the bench, and he lay down on the bench. He couldn't sit up. Such that the Alter Rebbe begashmius, b'derech hateva, the Alter Rebbe never saw him. It came kriyas atera, the Alter Rebbe was the balkere, the Alter Rebbe leaned by himself. And when it came to Chamishi, the Alter Rebbe gave this chassid an aliyah, even though he hadn't begashmius seen him, but he called him up, he called up his name. The chassid came up, and he got the aliyah, and in the middle of the kriya, the Alter Rebbe came to the pasuk of pasuk is slipping my mind now. It'll come back to me. The pasuk in Pashas Balak and Chamishi about witchcraft, and Alter Rebbe repeated the pasuk over and over. I don't have a chumash over there. But it'll come back to me soon. The Rebbe repeated the pasuk over and over, and by the laning, and he went into a big hispilus, a big dveikus, and he was out of this world and saying the pasuk over and over. And then the Alter Rebbe continued the laning, and the Chassid, from after his aliyah, he started feeling stronger. Gradually, over Shabbos afternoon, he continued to restore his strength. Matzah Shabbos, he went into Yechidus, he was feeling already better. And the Alter Rebbe again repeated the pasuk over and over with him. The Alter Rebbe went into Dveikus and he said the pasuk over and over. And then the Alter Rebbe benched him, you have nothing to worry from the witchcraft, from the Mechashves, and he told him to go on his way. And the Chassid went home. And when he got close to his home, close to the Kretschmer, the people in the neighborhood came to him and they came to greet his wagon, and they said, did you hear the amazing news? He said, what happened? He said, Shabbos morning, suddenly, unexpectedly, the Mechashves passed away on the spot. They died. And he's safe. There's nothing more for him to worry about. So the Chassid was overjoyed. They made the calculation, and they realized that the moment that they died was Shabbos morning, exactly at the time that the Alter Rebbe was repeating the pasuk. The pasuk is still alluding. That's one story. I'll come back to the pasuk. That's one story. And then there's another story with the Tzemach Tzedek. When the Tzemach Tzedek went to Petersburg, he was called to take part in the government arranged meeting of Rabbanim, and Chassidus was on trial, so to speak. And Tzemach Tzedek during that event was imprisoned, house imprisonment many times. And when he came back to Lubavitch, he overheard Chassidim speaking how the Tzemach Tzedek during the Asifas HaRabbanim showed Mesiras Nefesh. He had Mesiras Nefesh. So the Tzemach Tzedek became angry, and he said, you call this Mesiras Nefesh? Tzemach Tzedek said, I forfeited, I risked my physical life for the sake of the ruchnius of Klal Yisrael. He said, that's not Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh is to risk someone's ruchnius for the gashmius of another Yid. And he told the Chassidim a story. He said, Rabbi Baruch Mezhebuzher had a chassid. That the chassid was a businessman, and he was once traveling, and in the middle of traveling, he started benking sich. He started yearning after the Beis Medrash of his Rabbi Baruch, and after the atmosphere by Rabbi Baruch. And to the point that suddenly he just forgot about everything. He left his wagon and he ran to Rabbi Baruch. He came to Rabbi Baruch, and Rabbi Baruch started screaming at him. What are you doing? How are you behaving with a reckless, irresponsible way to leave your wagon? You're going to lose all your money. That's a toyudik way of behaving. It's not calculated. It's not mature. It's not proper, and that's not the way to behave. And that's not, you're responsible for your money and to your family. And he's screaming at him. And Shabbos morning he was screaming at him again at this chassid. How you behaving? How you acting? Why are you being so wild in your behavior? And Shabbos afternoon he's screaming at him again. There was another tzaddik who was there by Rabbi Baruch, and the other tzaddik couldn't handle it anymore, and he whispered in Rabbi Baruch's eye, Hamal b'pnei chaveri b'rabim. So Rabbi Baruch says to him, why don't you finish the Maimer Chazal? It says, Hamal b'pnei chaveri b'rabim ein lechelek le'elam haba. I know that, and I'm ready to forfeit my elam haba. I'm ready to give up my elam haba, because I saw that this Yid would have lost all his earthly possessions. He left it there. He didn't merit any special supernatural protection for his possessions. But because of the embarrassment, the humiliation that I caused him, So that became a kapara for him that he didn't have to lose the money. So I said, I'm ready to lose my Elam Haba. Abi, this Jew shouldn't lose his money. The Samach Tzedek said to the Chassidim, that's Mesiras Nefesh. Someone to forfeit his ruchnius, his spirituality, for the sake of another Yid's Gashmis. Those are two stories. That raise an obvious question. The reaction of the Alter Rebbe to the Chassid who had this Mesiras Nefesh, seemingly, this avodah of forgetting everything and coming to the Rebbe, was very different than the reaction of Rabbi. The Alter Rebbe seemed to condone it. The Alter Rebbe seemed to support it and to give a bracha to the Chassid. Whereas the Rabbi Mezhebazher seemed to find fault with it and to tell him off and to reprimand him about it and to chastise him. Why is there such a glaring difference between the outlook and the reaction seemingly of the Alter Rebbe and Rabbi Baruch to the same seeming behavior? That's the obvious question. So there could be a few possible answers. Maybe all of you have answers, but one possible answer is that it stems from the difference between Tzaddik B'Emunasa Yichya and Tzaddik B'Emunasa Yichaya, which was the different approach in Avedas Hashem between the Alter Rebbe and the other Talmidei HaMagid. By the other Talmidei HaMagid, they said Tzaddik B'Emunasa Yichya Al Tikri Yichya Elo Yichaya, that the Tzaddik has to influence and be mashpia on the Chassidim. The main avodas don't come from the Chassidim themselves, and that's why they were against learning Chassidus, because they said Ndas Elikei Avicha in its purest form. That's done by the tzaddik. That's not done by every chassid. Whereas the Alter Rebbe said Al Tikri Yechaya Lo Yichya, the Alter Rebbe said every avodah has to be to some degree, at least the efforts Kotzeyu V'Shemetz Minhu, at least some aspect, some level of the avodah by every single chassid by himself. It's avodah b'koyach atzmai. Everyone has to do everything, even though there's the avodah of the Rebbe that's be'ein areich higher than the avodah of the chassid. Nevertheless, the avodah of the Rebbe has to be at some level. He's the efforts Kotzeyu V'Shemetz Minhu by every chassid. The Meila, from this stems the difference. By Rabbi Mezhebazher said this avodah that these two chassidim did was an avodah of in ganzen Nishrechen in sich mit Welt. It was an avodah of Mesiras Nefesh. It was an avodah of Yechida Shabenefesh, Yechida Liyachtach. Sinishda garnished. There's nothing besides me and the Eibishter, besides Kedusha, besides Elikos, and therefore was able to be an avodah b'payil of disregarding every other aspect of his life and giving himself over exclusively to Elikos. Rabbi Mezhebazher, however, said that's not an avodah for a chassid. This Yechida, this Mesiras Nefesh, this higher, ultimate avodah von Vergessen auf sich im Ganzen, leave that to the Rebbe. Leave that to the Rabbeim. For you, for the chassid, Al Tikri Yichya Elo Yichaya, I'll be mashpia on you, what you have to take from this in your own personal life and your own personal avodas Hashem. The Alter Rebbe knows such a thing. If there's such an avodah, then every chassid has to have some level of that avodah. It's not the same way it is by the Alter Rebbe, without a question. But it's the way it is by the chassid. Alter Rebbe forgets about his Elam Haba and about his Gan Eden, and he says, "If we'll merit as dich alein, mili b'shamayim v'imcha leichafatzti b'aretz." That's the yechida in the nusach of the Alter Rebbe. The yechida in the nusach of the chassid is, vergesst auf the eigene Geld, and vergesst auf the eigene business, and geht zu the Alter Rebbe. And he goes to the Rebbe, and he goes to Lubavitch, and he goes to Liozna, and he goes to the place where over there is Elikus b'pshitas ve'elameis b'schachos. So that's the first thing. It comes Chavdalet Tevis. And every chassid is preoccupied with getting ready for Yud Shvat, with the Shleishim Yimei Achana, that the Rebbe taught us are broken down into three groups of 10 days each. And you look for this checklist and that checklist and this Achana and that Achana. Now for Vishenzain, by a chassid has to be every Aveda. Besides that, the achanas have to be the avodah b'payel. You have to have I suffer nigla, and I suffer chassidus, and I suffer davening, and there has to be all the things that you check off on your list. Besides that, the spirit of the avodah is yechidah shebenefesh. The pnimius of the achanas is yechidah liyachtach, the ability and the readiness to forget about everything except hu levadei ve'efes ulosei, except serving the Eibishter. That's what the Alter Rebbe gave us. That's the chassidus of the Alter Rebbe. That's the chassidus Chabad that the Alter Rebbe shared with us. And that's what has to be found, which each of us has to find in our Avodas Hashem, in our personal lives, that in our own way, in our own Eifen, Kufum Shiura delay, everyone's able to vergessen auf sich und vergessen auf sein Geld und vergessen auf sein Business und trachten, was will der Rebbe und was will der Eibishter. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'bracha. Okay, make a niggin.
Mazel tov to the yeshiva, Rabbi Wagner, 25 years. Wow!
25 years ago, the Rebbe guided the footsteps of myself and my family to Toronto to rebuild the yeshiva. Since then, any small part that we were able to play in the tremendous results that we were able to witness over the years, Bachrim and learning Torah, Bachrim growing in their Chassidishkeit, was the biggest incomparable schus.
There's always a part of my neshama and my heart that's in Yeshivas Lubavitch, Toronto. Those years had a dramatic impact on my personal life and obviously in the way I deal with my Talmidim.
The halls and the rooms of the yeshiva are places where lives are changed, lives are formed, where minds and hearts are molded, where Torah, where Yerushalayim, and where the Rebbe comes to life.
The Gemara tells us that when the great tzaddik Rabbi Akiva came home, he met his wife, and his Talmidim didn't know who she was, and they wanted to push her away. And he told his Talmidim that my Torah and your Torah is really her Torah, her schus. In all honesty and fully from me'omek halev, I want to say to our Rebbe Akiva that my Torah and the Torah of our Talmidim and their Hatzlacha, that's really all his.
If sie haben eine Idee, was so was mir soll tun mit Geld, was kann wegen nach verschiedene Sachen, sollen sie machen sein, beschließen und tun alles, was hängt auf und sie. Als Getimo, bewaschene Hamedine Priority, soll gehen nach Education, wenn wir uns das da nach Erziehen, in Niedigkeit, in Emes-Niedigkeit, was sie.
The chinuch that I got by Rabbi Wagner, dedication and care that each individual offered, and this is something that I try on a daily basis to impart in my community.
We have to move on and provide for the Bachrim, Bigashmis and Beruchnis, the proper setting and the proper atmosphere for them to continue the amazing and unimaginable growth that we have witnessed until now, that they should go to new scales and new dimensions.
When we give tzedakah today, it will help the yeshiva go on to do the much needed renovations, and definitely will be an added schus to bring a refuah shlema to our yeshiva, which will further continue to teach us and farbrengen with us and bring the yeshiva to new levels.
His total dedication, devotion to our chinuch really inspired us. It gave us a starkheit being a yid, a starkheit of being a chassid, a starkheit of our emunah. These yisoides, which are our entire ashkafas achayim, were all reused and we all nurtured in Toronto.
I merited to be there at the inception of the yeshiva when it first moved into its current facility, and now Yeshivas Lubavitch Toronto is preparing to enter phase 2.0, to take the next leap, to open new horizons. Please support this bold initiative.
A wusse da $1 macht von dem Zdokje und geht das ab auf a Yeshiva und auf a Schule und auf arme Leid.
L'chaim l'bracha. First of all, thank you to those who filled me in from my lapse. The pasuk is in Parshas Balak. It says, "Ki lo nachash b'Yaakov." There's no witchcraft by Yaakov. By leaning, when the Chassid got the Aliyah, the Alter Rebbe repeated over and over with Adveikus, "Ki lo nachash b'Yaakov." And then when he came into Yechidus again, the Alter Rebbe repeated the "Ki lo nachash b'Yaakov" until there was the Meifes that the Menchashvis passed away. So sometimes demands is demanded from us an avodah of Mesiras Nefesh. What is Mesiras Nefesh? We know that Alter Rebbe had Chilukei Deis with some of the other tzaddikim about whether Napoleon, it's good for the Yidden if Napoleon wins the war or he doesn't win the war. You know, today, occasionally you also hear Yidden that talk about politics. So what's the politics for Yidden? Politics for Yidden could be, Yechi, not Yechi, Lubavitch, Satmar, Echveis. And then Yidden talk about politics, Biden and Trump and whoever is the other, he's governor and this. So you have to know, Amal Menei Geret Politik. Yeah, they spoke politics in the times of Napoleon. But the politics was one thing, was is good for the Yidden. We have no shayches with their philosophies, and we have to know, if the Eibishter leave Mulachim V'Sarim B'Yad Hashem, when the Eibishter causes events to take place in the world, it's Bereishis, B'Shvil Yisrael, Shenikru Reishis. The only deal is what's going to come out from it for Yizkada v'Yizkada Shmei Rab. So there was Chilukei Deis. The Alter Rebbe said that if Napoleon wins the war, it will be good for the Yidden Begashmius, but it will be not good for them Beruchnius, and therefore he thought that Napoleon shouldn't win. And V'kach everyone knows the story with the Tkiyas Shefer. Akopanim, so there's a story that Alter Rebbe once wanted to learn with the Mittler Rebbe. I think it was a Priyetz Chaim, it says. And the Mittler Rebbe wasn't able to learn the Priyetz Chaim. He was very tzitragin. Because the Alter Rebbe said that Napoleon will not be successful. The Alter Rebbe said that he's not going to manage because the Alter Rebbe is fighting against him. It's not. And the news that was coming from the city was about advances after advances that Napoleon was making, that he was making victory after victory. And the Mittler Rebbe went to the Alter Rebbe and he said, Tata, you said that Napoleon is not going to be able to get into Moscow. He's not going to cross the gates of Moscow. He's right here by the gates of the city. So the Alter Rebbe told him, I swear to you, he's not going to come in. He's not going to be able to come this far. So the Mittler Rebbe was calmed down, even though it was still at odds with the news that was being said in the different mikvahs. But if the Alter Rebbe swore to him, that was good enough. It doesn't matter what you see out the window or what you read in the internet. So the Mittler Rebbe said, okay, let's go learn the Priyetz. It was a Priyetz Chaim or a Eis Chaim. He said, let's go learn the Priyetz Chaim. So the Alter Rebbe said, jetzt ist es zu spät. After musst du gedacht haben, Mesiras Nefesh. For that you had to have Mesiras Nefesh to be ready to accept on Cheshbenis what the Alter Rebbe said. Das heißt, sometimes we have Mesiras Nefesh with one condition. I have to know what the outcome is going to be. I need to have a full reassurance that this is going to be the result of my Mesiras Nefesh. If those two Chassidim, the Chassid in the story with Rabbi Baruch Mezhebusher and the Chassid in the story with the Alter Rebbe, would go to Liyazhna or to Mezhebush respectively, because they were sure that their wagon is going to stay whole, it's still a good thing. It's still better to spend a yontif or a Shabbos with your Rebbe than to spend it with your business. It's still something that they would get keiches, they would learn things, and they would get new keiches to be able to bring them forward further in the year. But it wouldn't be Mesiras Nefesh. The Mesiras Nefesh, the Alter Rebbe said, es hat sich gemont Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh is ich weiß, take nicht von gar nicht. I'm not doing this because it's Amenas Sheyeyasa Leilnes, like Rashi brings by Hara. I'm doing this because Lefia Emes, there's taka only one thing that's important to me. The only thing that's important is Eibishter. And therefore, even if that means the end of my business, or the end of my success, or the end of my covet, or the end of my popularity, or the end of my wealth, or the end of... Doesn't matter. Those are things that are taka, not important. That's the taich of Yechida. Yechida means that I'm alone with the Eibishter. Yechida liyachtach, that there's a sole, one lone thing that matters, and that means being attached to the Eibishter. And when I'm able to bring that out by myself, when that's able to be reflected in my behavior and my anhaga b'peil, that I behave in a way that reflects that all I care about is Eibishter. All I care about is serving the Eibishter, even if it means that I'm Lefia Emes, sacrificing, forfeiting my other possessions, my other comforts, my other things that are Adas Mesiras Nefesh. Now is a time of Yechida. Now is a time when we're getting ready for Yud Shvat. That Yud Shvat is bringing the Shechina Lamata Baretz. The world is waiting for us to do that. Waiting for many years, it's waiting another year, and once again, for us to bring the Shechina Lamata Baretz. Every time you gotta accomplish a new level, a new stage, bring things to a new point, requires Mesiras Nefesh. Rab Nachum, the Inikol of the Alter Rebbe, used to travel to Hadich a lot, where to the Tzion of the Alter Rebbe, and used to stay there for a Meshach Zman and then leave. And it was very strange to Chassidim, because Chassidim would go to the Mittler Rebbe, where the Mittler Rebbe was, and they would go to the Tzemach Tzedek after. Why was he continuing to go to the Alter Rebbe? Why was he continuing to go and to spend so much time by Hadich? So the Chassidim assumed the reason was, when the Alter Rebbe was running away from Napoleon, then before Chavdalet Tevis. So by each Parashas Dirachim, the Alter Rebbe, Rab Nachum, the Einikol, the son of the Mittler Rebbe, would ask the Alter Rebbe which way they should go, and the Alter Rebbe would lean on his stick, and he would tell them which way to go, and they would go that way. And by one of the Parashas Dirachims, the Rab Nachum made a mistake, and the Alter Rebbe had big agmas nefesh from that. So the Chassidim assumed, and B'derech HaTeva, that played a part in leading to the Histalkos on Chavdalet Tevis. So the Alter Rebbe, so the Chassidim assumed that Rab Nachum was traveling always to Hadich, to Alter Rebbe, because he was trying to make a tikkun on this mistake that he made Nabuch that caused so much damage. But once by a FARBRENGEN they asked him, and he said, no, that's not what it is. And he told him, what was it? He said, after his chasana, he had a garment that had a certain fancy design on it. The Rebbe asked him, could I take off the design and put on a patch on it instead? So he said to the Alter Rebbe, no. Hard to understand the story. Imagine the Rebbe comes to you and he says, could he take off your purple socks and put on a broken shoe instead? So a chassid is going to think twice. That the Rab Nachum, the Inekov of the Alter Rebbe, and the Chassidim used to travel to him to learn from him Midas Tevis and everything. And the Alter Rebbe asked him, he said, no. That's the story. The Alter Rebbe asked him, what do I have to do in order to convince you to do it? He said to the Alter Rebbe, nothing. I don't want to wear a garment with patches on it, with patchworks. Ervillished, again. So the Alter Rebbe says, how about if I promise you imi b'mechitzasi? That if you do that, you're together with me af yanevelt. Imi b'mechitzasi. Imi b'mechitzasi. He said, for that I'm ready to do it. Then he asked the Alter Rebbe, do I have to want mitanemes? Or is it enough that I just go through the motions? I wear a clothes like that, but do I have to mean it? I have to really mean it. So the Alter Rebbe said, Avada, you have to mean it with an emes, or with the emes from Yechida. That was the end of the conversation, so he didn't say anything more, so his clothes was left the way it was from before. Because already, I guess the emes from Yechida, it made a God for them. And because of this, so he was always coming to the Alter Rebbe to be misakin the fact that he felt in his youth he was very young then, because they used to get married very, very young. But still, his youthful indiscretion, he wanted to make a tikkun for. Chassidim said, I don't know if this comes to Friedrich Rebbe, said Friedrich Rebbe brings a nusach of the story, Likutei Diburim, I think, and the Friedrich Rebbe says, I think, that Chassidim said, that at that time there was a big klipa of levushim, or there was a gzeira on levushim. It says different things. And Alter Rebbe wanted to be mevatalit. And to be mevatalit, it demanded yechida, therefore he demanded from his einikel that he should do it with a emes of yechida. That mendach has zu uftan zachen darf man ankommen zu yechida. To accomplish things, whether it was to be mevatal a klipa, or to take away a gzeira, you need yechida. Yechida is Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh, like we see in the story with the Mittler Rebbe, is that it's without cheshbenis. Today there's cheshbenis of Mesiras Nefesh. There was always, Harab made a cheshben of Mesiras Nefesh. He said, if Avram is nasa le'nasa ni ite. What's wrong with that? At the fart, it's a gewarfen in a kivshen aish for the Eibishter. What's wrong is that it's not Mesiras Nefesh. If it's a cheshbon, the most lofty cheshbon, the most spiritual calculation is shenish Mesiras Nefesh. When is it Mesiras Nefesh? If I say, ich weiß nicht von gar nicht, ich weiß nur von der Eibishter. And now that we have to accomplish, now that we have to achieve, bring about the uftu of the Shleishim Yimei Achana, to reach the uftu of Yud Shvat, of another Yud Shvat, of bringing the Rakia, bringing the Shechina from the Rakia Aleph La'aretz. Mansach Mesiras Nefesh. Mansach by uns, that it should be Yechida L'Yachtach, that in our minds there is only one thing. V'kanech Isfir de Kavana Al Yena Liyis Le'Yisparech Dira B'Tachteinu. L'chaim, L'chaim, L'bracha.
What is the story? How can you tell the Rebbe no? How does such a thing exist?
Rabbi say it's time for a Koras HaTov. the Lubavitch Yeshiva of Toronto, deserved a big Akoras HaTov. We have Shluchim, Chassidim, Magdish Yurim, Mashpim, all over the world, alumni of Rabbi Wagner and Lubavitch Yeshiva in Toronto, including myself. We're going to give them back now, and Hashem will give us, in Mirz Hashem, 1,000 Pe'omim Kocho. It's the midday of Akoras HaTov. Rabbi say, it's time for Akoras HaTov. The Lubavitch Yeshiva of Toronto deserved a big Akoras HaTov. We have Shluchim, Chassidim, Magdish Yurim, Mashpim, all over the world, alumni of Rabbi Wagner and Lubavitch Yeshiva in Toronto, including myself. We're going to give them back now, and Hashem will give us, in Mirz Hashem, 1,000 Pe'omim Kocho. It's the midday of Akoras HaTov. Rabbi say, it's time for Akoras HaTov. The Lubavitch Yeshiva of Toronto deserved a big Akoras HaTov. We have Shluchim, Chassidim, Magdish Yurim, Mashpim, all over the world, alumni of Rabbi Wagner and Lubavitch Yeshiva in Toronto, including myself. We're going to give them back now.
I stopped what I was doing, traveling to us.
Rabbi say, it's time for Akoras HaTov. The Lubavitch Yeshiva of Toronto deserved a big Akoras HaTov. We have Shluchim, Chassidim, Magdish Yurim, Mashpim, all over the world, alumni of Rabbi Wagner and Lubavitch Yeshiva.
25 years ago, the Rabbi guided the footsteps of myself and my family to Toronto. Since then, every day, every hour that we were able to spend in Toronto was the biggest incomparable.
Mazel tov to the Yeshiva, Rabbi Wagner, 25 years. Wow!
25 years ago, the Rabbi guided the footsteps of myself and my family to Toronto to rebuild the yeshiva. Since then, any small part that we were able to play in the tremendous results that we were able to witness over the years, Bachrim and learning Torah, Bachrim growing in their Chassidishkeit, was the biggest incomparable schus.
There's always a part of my neshama and my heart that's in Yeshivas Lubavitch, Toronto. Those years had a dramatic impact on my personal life and obviously in the way I deal with my Talmidim.
The halls and the rooms of the yeshiva are places where lives are changed, lives are formed, where minds and hearts are molded, where Torah, where Yiras Shamayim, and where the Rebbe comes to life.
The Gemara tells us that when the great tzaddik Rabbi Akiva came home, he met his wife, and his Talmidim didn't know who she was, and they wanted to push her away. And he told his Talmidim that my Torah and your Torah is really her Torah, her schus. In all honesty and fully from me'omek halev, I want to say to our Rabbi Akiva.
I stopped what I was doing, traveling to give a share, to share with you something very important. Rabbi Akiva Wagner, my Yidid Nefesh, I've come to know very personally, and also has been very kind to our mishpacha, and my children learned over there to please stop what you're doing and see how much you can do and share and give and help support Rabbi Akiva's yeshiva. It's an amazing yeshiva. With that, you should be given. I stop what I.
Mazel tov to the Yeshiva, Rabbi Wagner, 25 years. Wow!
Years ago, the Rabbi guided the footsteps of myself and my family to Toronto to rebuild the yeshiva. Since then, any small part that we were able to play in the tremendous results that we were able to witness over the years, Bachrim and learning Torah, Bachrim growing in their Chassidishkeit, was the biggest incomparable schus.
There's always a part of my neshama and my heart that's in Yeshivas Lubavitch, Toronto. Those years had a dramatic impact on my personal life and obviously in the way I deal with my Talmidim.
The halls and the rooms of the yeshiva are places where lives are changed, lives are formed, where minds and hearts are molded, where Torah, where Yerushalayim, and where the Rebbe comes to life.
The Gemara tells us that when the great tzaddik Rabbi Akiva came home, he met
Chaim u'bracha.
And
Chaim u'chaim. So what are we trying to accomplish now? What's this new accomplishment in our preparation for Yud Shvat that necessitates Mesiras Nefesh? Every year we have Yud Shvat, and every year we have the Hachanas, and every year we have the programs and the miftzas and everything. So every year on Yud Shvat we're looking for the same thing. We're looking, preparing, and getting ready to bring the Shechina Lamata B'aretz. And we know exactly what that means. What does that mean to bring the Shechina Lamata B'aretz? As soll sein the Gilui von des Galus of Mashiach. We have a world that from the moment that it was created, it was a Helen V'Hester. The Mitzias of the world was that it's Mailim Umaster and Elikos. The Mitzias on the world is that we look at the world and we think there could be an independent entity, an independent existence versus Nish Elikos. That if I make money, then I could buy more food and buy a nice car, and if I get good from popularity, then I get a lot of kavod, and that's the world. And I also could daven to the Eibishter, and I could make money and get kavod for that also, right? It's a whole big challenge between spiritual and physical. That's the world we live in. And Mashiach is the Gilui Elikos in the world, is the Gilui that the world be'emes is not something separate from Elikos, that the world in the Goyla is the Aleph of Alufei Shaleilam, that I can't separate between the two. This is the meaning, the Pirush HaMilas of bringing the Shechina Lamata B'aretz. This is what we're focused on always when we're preparing for Yud Shvat. There's a story that I've said many times in the Tkufa of preparing for Yud Shvat. And since then, people have already, Baruch Hashem, found that the Baal HaMaisa himself says the story slightly different, and or publicized it or printed it different, but it's been garnished shuldig to the Baal HaMaisa, so he'll say it his way, I'll say it my way. But the story that I heard, as you'll hear, that I got confirmation for a lot of it over the years. The story that I first heard a number of years ago was that there was a Chabad house upstate New York, and one day a young man walks into the Chabad house, and he walks over to the Shliach, and he says to the Shliach, "Is there a God? And if yes, where is he?" I'm sorry, he said, "Is there a God? And if yes, can you prove it to me?" Shliach thought, it's a magnet. Yeah, a guy coming in with crazy questions out of the blue. It's not a normal way to start a conversation. Why is it not a normal way to start a conversation? Isn't that what a Chabad house is for? Why doesn't a regular person come into the Chabad house and say, "Could you prove to me that there's a God?" Because a regular person doesn't make a difference. Couldn't care less. He has other issues that he comes to the Chabad for. Could you send me a meal, free meal? Could you send me a... But the guy comes in and the Shliach is like, it's very unusual and bizarre. But as the Shliach starts talking to him, you realize that this young man is an extremely intelligent young man. And that this young man is obsessed with this question. He took a thought about this question and he learned about it and he studied it. There's colleges that give courses where they prove that there is a God and they prove that there's not a God. And he studied this material in depth and he became obsessed with it and he couldn't get to anything conclusive to the point that his life became miserable. And he's looking for that till finally someone said, what are you running to the colleges, the professors? You want to know if there's a God, you got to go to Chabad. That's a good answer. So he ended up in the Chabad house. So the Shliach started learning with him Chassidus. The deep Mamari Chassidus, and he was very intelligent, and he picked it up and he loved it. And they had a kviyas for a long time, for months. Because Chassidus answers that question. Right? That's what Chassidus is. Chassidus tells us and proves us and explains to us that there's a God. That's the first thing, by the way. Everyone knows that already, but some people don't know that. Some people are still trying to figure out, what am I looking for? What am I trying to get out of one mimer or another mimer? You're trying to get the das, Elokei Avicha, the question that some part of you, everyone has this young teenager in you, or young American boy in you who cares at some level if there's a God, and that part of you that cares, that's where he's going to get his answer. Anyway, so the Shliach learns with him, and it goes by months, and one day the Shliach comes into the Chabaras, and he goes over to his desk, he sees an envelope on his desk. In the envelope there's a letter from this young man, where he writes to him, Rabbi, I appreciate your learning with me, and the learning was beautiful, and it was enlightening, and everything. But I want you to know that because I appreciate so much all the time that you spent to me and the time that you gave me, I want to let you know that it's not working. I'm still not 100% convinced. It's not 100% conclusive. And I'm still miserable. I can't live with this misery, and I decided to commit suicide. And because of your kindness to me, I'm sharing my plans with you. So obviously the Shliach was Eis Mensch, and he starts trying to track down this young man, and he searches, and he finds him, and he starts talking to him, but the young man says, Rabbi, I appreciate what you did, but I'm at the end of my line, I can't do anything more, there's nothing else that's working for me. He says, one thing you didn't try yet. You want to know about God? Go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He says, fine, I'll try anything before I'll go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. When could I get an appointment by him? That's the big question, right? So he said, go to the secretary, tell them it's a matter of life and death. It is. It's mamish a matter of life and death. And hopefully they'll help you skip the line, because the appointments are backed up for months. Okay, he says, but what if they don't? I can't wait months. He says, if they don't, you have a plan B. When the Rebbe is coming to 7:70 in the morning, so stand there and wait for him and just walk over to him. And the secretaries will be very angry at you, but if the Rebbe answers you, no one's going to stop you anymore. Then you got your conversation. Fine. So he goes to the Maskiras. The Maskiras say, okay, it's a matter of life and death, we'll give you in a few weeks. Help them. So he goes to plan B, and he stands outside. The Rebbe's coming to 7:70. The Rebbe's walking towards the door. He says, Shalom, Rabbi. The Rebbe says, Shalom. He says, Rabbi, is there a God? And if yes, where is he? The Rebbe says, yes, in me, and in you, and in the whole world. Yes, in me, and in you, and in the whole world. The version that I read, he said, okay, Rabbi, thank you. He crossed the street, he went to the subway station, he took the subway to the train station, he took the train back to his hometown, and he went to the Chabaras, and he told the Shliach, listen, I got my answers from the Rebbe, and therefore I need you to teach me now how to live my life according, now that I know that there's a God, so I need you to teach me how to live my life accordingly. What did the Rebbe tell him? Yes, in me, and in you, and in the whole world. That's an answer, more of an answer than that he doesn't need. The Rebbe, the Indian of the Rebbe, the definition of a Rebbe, that Yud Shvat is l'chad nechad shama melucha, when we renew our iskashus to the Rebbe. What does that mean, iskashus to the Rebbe? What does it mean we have a Rebbe? Why do we need to have a Rebbe? Like the question that the Rebbe brings in Sichas, that so many people ask, why can't I look directly in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch myself? Why can't I go directly to the Eivish? Right? The Rebbe brings the question. What do we need our Rebbe? Because only our Rebbe could show us how the whole world is Elikos. That's what the Rebbe is from our viewpoint. It's impossible for us to see that. A Rebbe could show us it's in me and in you and in the whole world. It's ein neid mulvade. The world is not something separate from Eibishter Alzaz Alakos. But in order for that to be b'shleimus, properly, the way it's supposed to be, that's Mashiach. Govos is Eiseseinu leirayinu. Govos is that we do not see that everything is Alakos. We think and we see and we imagine that if I just do a little bit more, if I just make a little bit more money, I'll be happy. Right? There was a chassid from Montreal who was in Yechidus. Right? And his grandson was he learned in Yeshiva then, a few years later. And he was in Yechidus, this chassid. And he said to the Rebbe a question. He said, Peretz Mochkin is a Chassidish Yid, B'tachlis, A'ivid Hashem, and he's an Ani Marud, he has no money, he has no Gashmias, he has to struggle, or darf sich mutschen. And he told the Rebbe a name of a movie star, or something, a Hollywood person, a mushchas, or a lady, a mushchases, and everything, yeah. And she's a millionaire, and she has the whole world. Where's Yesher? Shefet Kolaretz Layasa Mishpa, that's how you treat Peretz Mochkin and Lahavdil, that's how you treat this. So the Rebbe said to him, Peretz Mochkin is Taka Ani Maru, the Raptish Kigel, he had to borrow a jacket from someone else to go into Yechidus, so he shouldn't go in with torn clothes to the Rebbe. He has no money, but the Rebbe said it doesn't bother him. He's not missing it. There's zufrieden. It's a geitim nishtan. Not that it would bother him to have more money, but he's not missing the money. It doesn't take away from his happiness and his satisfaction and his joy of life. And the other one, ever said she has $1 million or a few $1 million or whatever that was called. That was called in those days a lot of money, millions. They counted in the millions. That was the biggest number for a private person to have. She has millions of dollars, but she's not happy. It doesn't give her anything. It doesn't bring her any satisfaction. It doesn't give her any joy. And the Rebbe said, soon you'll see that I'm right. And a few years later, that lady committed suicide. The one that he asked the Rebbe about. Kapanim, so there is a mindset where we think if we just had a little more gashmias, we would find happiness. And then there's the seeing the emes that the only goal in life is to do what the Eibishter wants. As ich can daven in nacha daven wie der Eibishter will. Say another Amin Yehishmei Rabbi. There was once a FARBRENGEN in Montreal. A Bachrim. And this could be before the Gzeira. Possibly. By those Bachrim who were FARBRENGEN, it was before the Gzeira. One Bacher took a lot of mashka. And Ketiv Lev HaMelech Bayayin Ater Azagetan, I don't want anything in life. All I want is to be able to say one Amin Yeshmei Rabba Kidboy. To say one Amin Yeshmei Rabba properly, the way it's meant to be. And he said it was like Nikarim Divrei Emes, and even Nachmashet. There was another Bacher there who was a Pelisha Chassid. And he was so nispoiled from this Vart, the Pelisha, as das hat ihm gebracht zu Lubavitch. Ada yem azeh, mit seinen Kindern, an eine Klach, ada yem azeh. Akapanim, asked us why? Because that's what a Chassid is, gitim nishtan. But to come to that comes from a Rebbe. That's the Geula Pratis, and ultimately the ultimate Geula that we see and recognize that the only thing that matters in the world is Alman Yeshmei Rabba, is Abyssal Kedusha, is bringing Nachai Yidden enter to Yiddishkeit, is Avas Yisrael, something that the Eibishter cares about. That's the only thing that I could care about. If it's not important to Alikos, then it's not important to me. But this is the ultimate realization of this is the Gili of Mashiach. This new Gili of Mashiach, as Mizal Kukin and Welten Zainas is the Aleph and Alufish Alelam. This needs a breakthrough to bring about. What's a breakthrough is Mesiras Nefesh, is Yechidah. For this, we need by ourselves the Avodah of Yechida, which is the genuine Avodah of Yechida, uncheshbenes, without expecting an outcome, without depending on an outcome, without thinking about a reasonable outcome, but caring only about one thing, hu levadei v'efuzulase. L'chaim, l'chaim l'bracha.
I stopped what I was doing, traveling to give a share with you something very important. Rabbi Akiva Wagner, I did nefesh, I've come to know very personally, and also has been very kind to our mishpacha, and my children learned over there to please stop what you're doing and see how much you can do and share and give and help support Rabbi Akiva's yeshiva. It's an amazing yeshiva. That you should be given. I stopped what I was doing, traveling to give a share with you something very important. Rabbi Akiva Wagner, I did nefesh, I've come to know very personally, and also has been very kind to our mishpacha, and my children learned over there to please stop what you're doing and see how much you can do and share and give and help support.
25 years ago, the Rebbe guided the footsteps of myself and my family to Toronto. Since then, every day, every hour that we were able to spend in Toronto was the biggest incomparable schus, the greatest privilege. If this cause is important for you, that being a part of the tremendous work of the yeshiva is important for you, then the Eibishter will help you find the money for that also. And you'll be able to be a part of this and to take this opportunity to be a shutef in the continued growth of the yeshiva. We have to move on and provide for the bachrim, b'gashmias and b'ruchnias, the proper setting and the proper atmosphere for them to continue the amazing and unimaginable growth that we have witnessed until now. That they should go to new scales and new dimensions. Thank you very, very much for everyone who's able to join us and to do something and to share it with your friends and acquaintances and families. And in Yirtzeh Hashem, we should have the true binyan, the true ultimate building. 25 years ago, the Rebbe guided the footsteps of
Rabbi say, it's time for a Koras HaToiv. The Lubavitch Yeshiva of Toronto deserve a bigger Koras HaToiv. We have shluchim, chsidim, magdishiyurim, mashpim all over the world, alumni of Rabbi Wagner and Lubavitch Yeshiva in Toronto, including myself. We're going to give them back now, and Hashem will give us, in Yirtzeh Hashem, 1,000 pe'omim kocho. It's the midday of a Koras HaToiv. Rabbi say, it's time for a Koras HaToiv. The Lubavitch Yeshiva of Toronto deserve a bigger Koras HaToiv. We have shluchim, chsidim, magdishiyurim, mashpim all over the world, alumni of Rabbi Wagner and Lubavitch Yeshiva in Toronto, including myself. We're going to give them back now, and Hashem will give us, in Yirtzeh Hashem, 1,000 pe'omim kocho. It's the
Mazel tov to the yeshiva, Rabbi Wagner, 25 years. Wow!
25 years ago, the Rebbe guided the footsteps of myself and my family to Toronto to rebuild the yeshiva. Since then, any small part that we were able to play in the tremendous results that we were able to witness over the years, Bachrim and learning Torah, Bachrim growing in their Chassidishkeit, was the biggest incomparable schus.
There's always a part of my neshama and my heart that's in Yeshivas Lubavitch, Toronto. Those years had a dramatic impact on my personal life and obviously in the way I deal with my Talmidim.
The halls and the rooms of the yeshiva are places where lives are changed, lives are formed, where minds and hearts are molded, where Torah, where Yiras Shamayim, and where the Rebbe comes to life.
The Gemara tells us that when the great tzaddik Rabbi Akiva came home, he met his wife, and his Talmidim didn't know who she was, and they wanted to push her away. And he told his Talmidim, that my Torah and your Torah is really her Torah, her schus. In all honesty and fully from me'oimek halev, I want to say to our Rebbe Akiva that my Torah and the Torah of our Talmidim and their Hatzlacha, it's really all his.
If sie haben eine Idee, was so was mir soll tun mit Geld, was kann wegen nach verschiedene Sachen, sollen sie machtig sein, beschließen und tun alles, was singt auf und sie. Als Gedimo, bewaschner Hamedina Priority, soll gehen nach Education, wenn wir auf das da nach.
Rabbi say, it's time for a chorus atoiv.
Chaim u'bracha. Zelig Aronov once came by the Rebbe with his son for Kishel Bracha. And his son was in front of him. He was behind. It was a Matzah Yantif, obviously. It was a Kishel Bracha. And the Rebbe poured Kishel Bracha to his son. And after every certain amount of pours, so the Rebbe would turn around to fill up the becher. Which is interesting. Why did the Rebbe turn around to fill up the becher? He could have done it without filling up the becher. But I guess it's machin as a achiza, like the Baal Shem Tov would have a cup of mashka in front of him, so they should blame the red face on that. So the Rebbe had to fill her up, so they should blame the pouring on the one who's filling up. I guess. But the Rebbe would turn around every few pours to fill up the cup. I heard from a guy in Talucha once. I'm going to come back to say. I heard from a guy in Talucha in Flatbush, in Rabbi Vigler's shul. So I went in Talucha, and he tells me he went to Kishel Bracha once, and there was two lines. So the Rebbe would switch from one line to the other line. Right? Comes his turn. As soon as he comes up there, the Rebbe turns to the other line. But he didn't notice Seder in 770. It's like his first time there. All he sees is he comes up to the Rebbe, and as he gets there, the Rebbe turns away. So he's Eis Mensch, like Vasa Bechketan. What do I have to be Messiah? That's not a good sign. Yeah, it's not a good message to be given. Didn't know what to do. But the Rebbe gave the other line and turned back to him. He said, so the Rebbe turned back to him. The Rebbe gave him a big smile. To reassure him, nothing to do with you. This is just like the Rebbe felt his. So some people the Rebbe could turn away, and you could it could be scary. Zelig Aronov, the Rebbe gave his son Kishel Bracha. He's behind his son, and the Rebbe said something to his son, and then the Rebbe turned to fill up the becher. Zelig, his son was, I forget, 5, 6, 7 years old, was a child, a young child. So what does the Rebbe have to say to my son? He's a little boy, yeah. So he turns to Label. He asked Label, what did the Rebbe say to my son? Did you get what the Rebbe said to my son? And Label went like this. I didn't hear what the Rebbe said to your son, yeah. Now while Label is standing like this, the Rebbe turned back around. He finished filling up the becher, he turned back around, and he sees Label standing like this. So the Rebbe understood Label standing like this as an answer to a question. So the Rebbe said, was versteht ihr nicht? In other words, he understands, he's asking, what did I say? Was versteht ihr nicht? Ist nicht gewähnt, da sind seine Yemiledes, habe ich ihm gesagt, happy birthday. His Yemiledes was, I think, sometime after Rosh Hashanah. The last time they were there was Matzah Rosh Hashanah, and this was Matzah Simchas Torah, or Matzah. The dates, again, you have to get from him, but I went by a Meshach Zaman since the last time he was by the Rebbe. In between was a birthday, and the Rebbe, who's every day answering thousands of letters and thousands of of questions and thousands of kisha brachas and thousands of dollars. The Rebbe has to make sure that he didn't miss out wishing this little boy a happy birthday. So the message of the story is not just the Rebbe's zikarin and the Rebbe's sensitivity and the Rebbe's individual caring. The message of the story is also that when we come to the Rebbe, it's moving on from the last time we were by the Rebbe. It has to be development. It has to be a new stage. We said it's yechida. What's another condition of yechida? By yechidas, every yechidas has to be further growth. Yechidus is not a checklist that, in Yechidus I fast that day, and I put on a gartel, and I write a tzettel, so every Yechidus I'll fast, and I'll put on a gartel, and I'll write the same tzettel. No, what you did by last Yechidus doesn't make sense by this Yechidus. You're supposed to be growing further. Rabbi Grossbaum, FARBRENGEN Yeshiva once. Rabbi Zalman Aaron Grossbaum, and he said that when he was a bacher, he was in Yechidus. A bacher's Yechidus was 60 seconds or less. Very fast. He went into Yechidus, and the Rebbe read his zettel. What was that zettel? A bacher wrote about stomach aches. What would you write about today? Hopefully the same things, yeah. That you want to be a better Jew, you want to be a better chassid, you want to be a better tamin, you want to daven better, you want to have better avos Yisrael, you want to learn so that's what they wrote down. So he wrote whatever he wrote at that stage in his Yechidus. And the Rebbe is reading the zettel, and the Rebbe says, Dacht mir mat geschmust wegen dem letzten Mal. So didn't we have these questions by the last Yechidus? So he was FARBRENGEN very geschmack. So the Rebbe gave me a kick in the pants, I think he said. So the Rebbe said, you're coming into Yechidus. Yechidus was once, max twice a year. You're coming into Yechidus to do the same thing you did by the last Yechidus, to get the same thing you got by the last Yechidus, to ask the same question you asked by the last Yechidus. It's Yechida, that means now take that Yisrael u'malka b'chidei. Take that, who levade ve'evezu lasai. That's a mindset that has to inevitably change our behavior and change our day-to-day life. Min hakatza lakatza. And the more das lik sechab, the more the way we act has to change. Min hakatza lakatza. Has to bring us to a further change. Min hakatza lakatza. So when we say Yud Shvat, the preparations for Yud Shvat is the concept of Mesiras Nefesh. It's the concept of Yechida. That means that I can't be just doing what I did last year, Yud Shvat. As lofty as it may have been, as holy as it may have been, everyone did Kulam Ahuvim, Kulam Brurim, Kulam Biberim, Kulam Kadeshim. Everyone did holy, beautiful, meaningful things last Yud Shvat. But we stayed in Galus, most of us. And by extension all of us, because if there's a Jew in a Pina Nidachas was Bayam Leichnish the Gilia Lekos Gilia Atzmos, then everyone is still in Golos. So if we're still in Golos, that means now it has to be a further Mesiras Nefesh, a further Yechida, further connecting ourselves with the Eibishter, with a deeper connection, that there's nothing besides me and the Eibishter, in a way that influences my day-to-day life, that my day-to-day life reflects, that all that counts to me, all that's important to me, is ein Yid and eis firen the Eibishter Shlichas, eis firen was the Eibishter will, that the world should be a dira le yisparich betachtenim. So now we're still in the very beginning of the stretch, right? We had Asara B'Tevis as the beginning, so it's Chavdalet Tevis. It's just in the first 10-day Tkufa, a few days past the first day Tkufa. But every day is a day. Every day has to be full, has to be Baba Yamin. Every day it has to have the Avodah Asher Avad in order to reach this preparation that we're all looking for to reach this Yechidah. In order to change the way I think, to have the upleg as altes Eibishter, so it depends on how I feel each day. Each day has to be filled mit verstehen Wort Chassidus. Verstehen, spend time, think about it, delve into it, understand it, that it should change the way you think and change the way you look at the world and change the way you think about the world. It should change the way we daven. Because it's Yechida. Once I bring into my mindset Yechida, Taka the Eibishter is alone, there's nothing besides the Eibishter. So automatically, vetzich unheren in mein davenen, in my via daitayim vashivesel vavecha ki avaye ulekim bashamayim imal, valoretz mitachas eined is doch das andere Werte. And the same thing, every aspect of my day to day is, it's Yechida, it's different, it's alone, it's all about the Eibishter. The Alter Rebbe said that there were three was haben gehat a chush in Elam Haza. Moshe Rabbeinu, because Moshe Rabbeinu davened was Chanan Tfilis to go into Eretz Yisrael. Got a chush in Elam Haza. The Baal Shem Tov, because the Baal Shem Tov wanted to offer Toshav, wanted to be the kind, got a chush in Elam Haza. And Alter Rebbe said on himself, and he said there's three vasabinishkat achoshin elumaza. I don't remember who the three vasabinishkat achoshin elumaza, or if Alter Rebbe said them. But he said there's three vasabinishkat achoshin elumaza. What's the choshin elumaza? What's the Alter Rebbe's Beish Rabbeinu and the Baal Shem Tov haben gehat achoshin elumaza? What's the choshin elumaza? L'cheira, the Alter Rebbe said about Rav Shlomo Karliner that he got the most moifsim from the Maggid. Karliner took a lot, a ribbon moifsim. And his whole anhaga was a moifistic anhaga. And the Alter Rebbe said as there is a tafach hecher from Welt, from Elam Haza. So Rav Shlomo Karliner is permanently above Elam Haza, b'meilas bayam as a hanhaga. But Alter Rebbe said, wir haben gesehen andere, was other Talmidei HaMaggid, was eine gewähnt 10 Ames hecher von Welt. Yeah? 10 Ames is even, it's beyond Rosh Hashanah, it's beyond Rosh Hashanah. 10 Ames. So there's others who are 10 Ames higher than the world. Alter Rebbe L'cheira was talking about himself. The Tefach Hecher is one sphera above the world. It's Yesod, because Yesod is higher than Teva. It's L'mayla Mea Teva. From Yesod comes the Yanim of Moifsim, of Nisim. 10 Ames is all the 10 spheres. It's completely higher than the world. But with the Alter Rebbe being all the 10 spheres above the world, hat got a chush in Elam Haza. When in Welt, the Tachlis HaKavana is in Welt. Alter Rebbe's chush in Elam Haza is that the connection with the Eibishter isn't dependent on running away from Minyane Ha'elam, of running away from Gashmias. Alter Rebbe says in the Welt, we appreciate and we value Elam Haza, and we're able to find our connection with the Eibishter in and within the world. And that's the Gili of Mashiach. We need Yechida now. We need the Mesiras Nefesh, the Yechida, our Chassidus, our davening, our learning and davening. Everything has to be in a way of Yechida, that we're able to raise ourselves, to elevate ourselves. As nishtal garnished in unser Leben, achutz the Eibishter und the Rebbe und Lubavitch. Like the famous Farbrengen, the Rebbe said, was Taka Chavdala Tevis Farbrengen, I think. And with that Yechida, Mesiras Nefesh, what we can in Uftan, that we can in Peil sein, till the Peil Yeshua is Bekerev Haaretz, the Ilom Chadash Ra'at, so Uftan asal sein a Welt von Mashiach. L'chaim, l'chaim. L'chaim, l'chaim.
I stopped what I was doing, traveling to give a to share with you something very important. Rabbi Akiva Wagner, my did nefesh, I've come to know very personally, and also has been very kind to our mishpacha, and my children learned over there to please stop what you're doing and see how much you can do and share and give and help support Rabbi Akiva's yeshiva. It's an amazing yeshiva. That you should be given. I stopped what I was doing, traveling to give a to share with you something very important. Rabbi Akiva Wagner, my did nefesh, I've come to know very personally, and also has been very kind to our mishpacha, and my children learned over there to please.
Rabbi say it's time for a Koras HaTov. The Lubavitch Yeshiva of Toronto deserve a bigger Koras HaTov. We have shluchim, chsidim, magdishiyurim, mashpim all over the world, alumni of Rabbi Wagner and Lubavitch Yeshiva in Toronto, including myself. We're going to give them back now, and Hashem will give us, in Mirz Hashem, 1,000 pe'omim kocho. It's the midday of a Koras HaTov. Rabbi say it's time for a Koras HaTov. The Lubavitch Yeshiva of Toronto deserve a bigger Koras HaTov. We have shluchim, chsidim, magdishiyurim, mashpim all over the world, alumni of Rabbi Wagner and Lubavitch Yeshiva in Toronto, including myself. We're going to give them back now, and Hashem will give us.
Mazel tov to the yeshiva, Rabbi Wagner, 25 years. Wow!
25 years ago, the Rabbi guided the footsteps of myself and my family to Toronto to rebuild the yeshiva. Since then, any small part that we were able to play in the tremendous results that we were able to witness over the years, Bachrim and learning Torah, Bachrim growing in their Chassidishkeit, was the biggest incomparable schus.
There's always a part of my neshama and my heart that's in Yeshivas Lubavitch, Toronto. Those years had a dramatic impact on my personal life and obviously in the way I deal with my Talmidim.
The halls and the rooms of the yeshiva are places where lives are changed, lives are formed, where minds and hearts are molded, where Torah, where Yiras Shamayim, and where the Rebbe comes to life.
The Gemara tells us that when the great tzaddik Rabbi Akiva came home, he met his wife, and his Talmidim didn't know who she was, and they wanted to push her away. And he told his Talmidim that my Torah and your Torah is really her Torah, her schus. In all honesty and fully from me'omek halev, I want to say to our Rabbi Akiva that my Torah and the Torah of our Talmidim and their Hatzlacha, it's really all his.
If sie haben eine Idee, was so was mir soll tun mit Geld, was kann wegen nach verschiedene Sachen, sollen sie machtig sein, beschließen und tun alles, was hängt ab von sie. Als Getimo, bewaschene Hamedine Priority, soll gehen nach Education, wenn wir uns das da nach verziehen. In Niedigkeit, in Emes-Niedigkeit, was
The chinoch that I got by Rabbi Wagner, dedication and care that each individual offers. And this is something that I try on a daily basis to impart in my community.
We have to move on and provide for the Bachrim, the Gashmis, and the Ruchnis, the proper setting and the proper atmosphere for them to continue the amazing and unimaginable growth that we have witnessed until now. That they should go to new scales and new dimensions.
When we give tzedakah today, it will help the yeshiva go on to do the much needed renovations, and definitely will be an added schus to bring a refuah shlema to our yeshiva, which will further continue to teach us and farbrengen with us and bring the yeshiva to new levels.
Rabbi say it's time for a Koras HaTov. The Lubavitch Yeshiva of Toronto deserve a bigger Koras HaTov. We have shluchim, chsidim, magdishiyurim, mashpim all over the world, alumni of Rabbi Wagner and Lubavitch Yeshiva in Toronto, including myself. We're going to give them back now, and Hashem will give us, in Mirz Hashem, 1000 Pe'omim Kocho. It's the Mideh of Akor HaSatoif.
So there's a story I wrote recently in an email. There was a Yid. I wrote part of it once before, then I got more details. There was a Yid, his name was Chaim Zimmerman. I actually have at home a sefer from him that I got from someone. Chaim Zimmerman was a different sefer, not the one that the Rebbe wrote a Arathon. He was a Goy Nadir. He was a young Vilde person. He lived in America at that time. And he loved it. I used to love to speak to the Rebbe and learn him. And he used to speak to Rabbi and learning and tell Rabbi about his impressions of the Rebbe. There was a number of stories. So one of the stories is just to bring you up what kind of a person, as a preface to the one I want to tell you. Rabbi said he had no appreciation at all for Chassidus, for Rebbe Shazachar. It was in Ganzim Imenu V'Hala. He just liked the Rebbe's Go'inus. That's all he liked. He liked to speak to the Rebbe and learn him. And he used to scream at the Bachrim. He said, you have such a Goin and you turned him into a Rebbe. What's the Getav with him? And Rabbi said a story. He once saw him talking to the Rebbe and learning. And he said the way the Rebbe would talk to him in learning, the Rebbe would stand in one place and he would be running around. And it would be Mara Mekemis, the whole conversation. The Rebbe would say Amara Mokim, he would say it was all Mara Mekemis. And then the Rebbe said Amara Mokim, and he said, this is Eisen. And he said to Rabbi afterwards, he said, you saw our conversation. He said, you saw what the Rebbe said at the end. I think it was a Yerushalmi. He said, that raya that the Rebbe brought at the end from the Yerushalmi, that was Eisen. But he said, but I still think I'm right. Derech Agav, I want to tell you a story. So there's a story, it's interesting, it's printed in the Hisafis of Sichas Kedesh. I forget now which year. But it says over there a story. In the Hisafis, there's sometimes a Yechid that someone said to the Rebbe in Yechidus. Chassid goes into Yechidus and he says there was a Chassid in Australia that he was sick. And he went to the doctors said that it's a serious situation. And he has to operate and remove his tchil, which is his spleen. But we don't know what the spleen is. The guys who are learning smicha at least know what the tchil is, right? So he has to have his tchil removed. He was a chassid, so they wrote to the Frierdiker Rebbe. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said, no, they shouldn't operate, they shouldn't remove his tchil. There was a Rav there in Australia at the time, and the Rav in Australia, a Litvish Rav, a Ilamish Rav, and the Rav is like all upset and he's screaming, it's a matter of life and death, it's a matter of pikuach nefesh. How could they go listen to some rabbi who's thousands of miles away in a matter of pikuach nefesh, of nefash, dini nefesh? Obviously they didn't listen to him, they were chassidim and they didn't operate. So this chassid was telling the story to the Rebbe. He tells the Rebbe, this happened, I think it was 32 years before. 32 years ago. Last year, he said, it's 31 years later, I met this Elam Misharav, and he says to me, Nu, what was the end of that story? I didn't see him in decades, yeah? So what was the end of the story? He said, last year, they operated and they removed his trail. So 30 years later, so the Rav says, hast du bin gewinn gerecht? So the Rebbe says to him, das ist a misnagid. So that's what a misnagid is. He has the raya, du sagst doch Brachel bitcha ktana, du sagst doch klare diburim, du bist noch als gerecht. So that's what he was. He says, I still think I'm right. A month later, Rabbi said, he was talking to Rabbi and learning, and he said to Rabbi, remember that conversation? He said, yeah. Remember the last raya that I said to the Rebbe? You all remember? He said, yeah. You said to Yerushalmi, yeah. He said that raya, the last raya that the Rebbe brought, he said that raya was Eisen. but I still think that I'm right. Right? That's fine. But he had a lot of stories. He once called Rabbi Chodakov 3 o'clock in the morning. He said, tell the Rebbe, go into the Rebbe and tell the Rebbe that Chaim Zimmerman said that the Rebbe is the Goyna Der. As a Geshen, the Rebbe gave him a zettel, an answer to a question that he asked, and he just finished deciphering the Rebbe's answer. So Rabbi heard about the story maybe from Rabbi Chodakov, maybe from him, I didn't get that clear. So Rabbi asked him, he gave you a little paper. Yeah? With that paper, a few words, from that the Rebbe is the Goyna Der. So he said, what are you talking about? That paper had in it Kol HaTeira Kula. So the Iker story, he was once in Chicago. Sifas HaRabbanim. So first of all, I want to tell you again, to bring out that he wasn't a chassid. Klal. In the end, he moved to Eretz Yisrael. And the Rebbe told him that he shouldn't go to Eretz Yisrael. Yeah. And he went. And Rabbi said that you could understand be'ini basar, b'das tachten, why the Rebbe told him not to go. And Eretz Yisrael, he lost his whole mahus. Over here, he was like a wilde guy. He had his personality. Over there, it was lost. He was like swallowed up in Eretz Yisrael, and he wasn't what he was able to be. But whatever, he went. Says he didn't. A Rebbe says, Rebbe says coming on this. He didn't have the chassidish side of a Rebbe. Was in ganzem imenu v'halo. No shaykhs. He was in Chicago once, and there was a Sifas HaRabbanim, and one of the Rabbanim who was there spoke disparagingly about the Rebbe. Said a comment, said something not nice about the Rebbe. So Chaim Zimmerman pops up. He says, "There's the that Rav." He says, "Is an Amoritz Deiraisa." So the other Rabbanim asked him, "How could you say that? The kennst du nicht." The Rav, he didn't know the Rav. How could you say he's an Amoritz? Could say as a Rasha. So he said, "This Rav kenn ich nicht." I don't know what he knows. Said, "Aber the Lubavitcher Rebbe kenn ich." And for someone to speak against the Lubavitcher Rebbe meint das, als hat nicht gechuschen Teira. Weiß nicht, was Teira ist. Als wollte gewusst, was Teira ist, wollte nicht kennt reden, als auf the Lubavitcher Rebbe. To me, ist nicht da kein größere chassidische Hergisch wie dem. This is a misnagid, right? He's a misnagid, kol misnagid, durch and durch. Meile for him to say the Rebbe is go'inus. He thought the Rebbe is go'inus. A misnagid could see the Rebbe is go'inus, well, gesehen the go'inus. Even when he was in Eretz Yisrael, people visited him. He said, just like I know my 5 fingers, the Lubavitcher Rebbe is clear in Kol HaTeira Kula, the same way I'm clear in my 5 fingers. Good. Das kann sagen als misnagid. To say that someone who doesn't respect the Rebbe, who doesn't value the Rebbe, who doesn't appreciate the Rebbe, hat nicht kein Chush und Teira. Das ist doch a chassidische Hergisch betachlis. Ist das as there was more to him. He would not identify it. He would not label it as a chassidische Hergisch. Klal. But he came to the point to have an appreciation that to appreciate the Rebbe means to have a Chush und Teira. Not to appreciate the Rebbe means du hast kein Chush und Teira. Kannst nicht sagen, du bist a Lamden, but you were misled. If du hast a Chush und Teira, darfst du marich sein, der Lubavitcher Rebbe. So made it a gewart. Gehe Eleinu. As du hast a Chush und Alikus, care about Alikus, to value Alikus, to appreciate what Alikus is, means, has to translate as to a genuine desire to connect myself to the Rebbe. It has to translate as respecting, appreciating, being marich and valuing the Rebbe. That's the chassidische hergish von a misnagid. It's the chassidische hergish von a Chaim Zimmerman. Azay is the Metzias. B'meila the hachanas for Yud Shvat, we have to strengthen by ourselves this nekuda. A chassid cares about Eibishter. And when he cares about Eibishter, then he automatically wants to become closer to the Rebbe. when he becomes closer to the Rebbe, he automatically cares more about Eibishter. And with these two things, automatically is Eilam Chadash Ra. Then the world, we get a chush in Eilam Haza. Then the world of Eilam Haza is not the Eilam Haza that we thought, that we looked, that we of Eilam Haza versus a Yesh V'Dover Nifrat Chas V'Shalom. It's not a Eilam Haza that's detached from Eibishter Chas V'Shalom. The Eilam Haza itself is just a hechsher, it's a keli, it's a vehicle to be able to make a dira le'yisbarich b'tachteina, to be megala Mashiach, to bring the aleph of alufish aleilam into and to within the geila, into the kerev haaretz, und dort megala zayin achtas havaya. And that's the other story with Chaim Zimmerman. He went over to Rabbi, he came out of Yechidus, and whatever, different versions, but the Nikuda was he wanted to speak to someone who's going to be able to understand what he says. So he brought him to Rabbi. He told Rabbi. The way Rabbi writes the story is actually more detailed. That looks better. Rabbi says that I think it was after that story with the little note. Rabbi asked him, what does that mean, the goin ador? So he said to me, you're not going to understand. He says, try, tell me. Told him, you learned the Pnei Yeshua. Pnei Yeshua, Atur learned Yiddir Blat in Shas. Many, many times. He learned the Blat, and he had questions on Erdka Harvit, and he answered the questions. He learned another Blat, at Weiter Gad Kashas, on Erdka Harvit, and he found it, and that's how he went through the whole Shas like that. He said, the Rishonim didn't learn like that. The Rishonim had a nekuda, 2 nekudas, 3 nekudas, 4 nekudas, and that's how they learned kol Teira kula with those nekudas. The whole Teira fits into one of their nekudas. He says the Rebbe has 2, 3, 4, maximum 5, not more than 5 nekudas, and the Rebbe gita dur kol Teira kula medin nekudas, and that's everything fits into one of those nekudas. That's what he said. He didn't think even Rabbi, he had a lot of respect for Rabbi. Rabbi was a bocher, he respected him learning it. But he didn't think Rabbi didn't appreciate that. That was his glimpse into the greatness of the Rebbe. And what this means for us in Chassidus, that we for sure understand. There's nekudas, there's one nekuda. And the one nekuda is hu levade ve'efes hu lasei anei neid movade havaya hu alikim neid movade. And everything else is about that nekuda. Hafatzas hamayanis chutza und miftzayim und davening und learning chassidus and learning nigla. It's all that nekuda. We have to strengthen by ourselves that nekuda. And that nekuda is the nekuda of yechida. That there's nothing besides the Eibishter. It's the nekuda of yechidas. As we get a race from the eigene cheshbenes, we just separate ourselves from all our calculations and all our concerns and all our strategies and all our worries and all our plans and all our agendas. And we set ourselves up for one thing, Aseda Eibishter and Aseda Rebbe, and we have to give ourselves over to understanding that, appreciating that, and living with that. Durch Lernen Chassidus und Leben wie ein Chassid und Leben wie Tmimen. L'chaim.
You wrote a letter to Rabbi.
'Mazel tov to the yeshiva, Rabbi Wagner, 25 years. Wow!
Years ago, the Rabbi guided the footsteps of myself and my family to Toronto to rebuild the yeshiva. Since then, any small part that we were able to play in the tremendous results that we were able to witness over the years, Bachrim and learning Torah, Bachrim growing in their Chassidishkeit, was the biggest incomparable schus.
There's always a part of my neshama and my heart that's in Yeshivas Lubavitch, Toronto. Those years had a dramatic impact on my personal life and obviously in the way I deal with my Talmidim.
The halls and the rooms of the yeshiva are places where lives are changed, lives are formed, where minds and hearts are molded, where Torah, where Yiras Shamayim, and where the Rebbe comes to life.
The Gemara tells us that when the great tzaddik Rabbi Akiva came home, he met his wife, and his Talmidim didn't know who she was, and they wanted to push her away. And he told his Talmidim that my Torah and your Torah is really her Torah, her schus. In all honesty and fully from me'omek halev, I want to say to our Rabbi Akiva that my Torah and the Torah of our Talmidim and their Hatzlacha, it's really all his.
If sie haben eine Idee, was so was mir soll tun mit Geld, was kann wegen nach verschiedene Sachen, sollen sie machen, sein beschließen und tun alles, was hängt ab von sie. Als Gedimo, bewaschen Medina Priority, soll gehen nach Education, wenn wir uns das da nach verziehen. In Niedigkeit, in Niedigkeit, was sie.
The chinuch that I got by Rabbi Wagner, dedication and care that each individual offered. And this is something that I try on a daily basis to impart in my community.
We have to move on and provide for the Bach and Bigashmis and Beruchnis, the proper setting and the proper atmosphere for them to continue the amazing and unimaginable growth that we have witnessed until now, that they should go to new scales and new dimensions.
When we give tzedakah today, it will help the yeshiva go on to do the much needed renovations, and definitely will be an added schus to bring a refuah shlema to our yeshiva, which will further continue to teach us and farbrengen with us and bring the yeshiva to new levels.
His total dedication, devotion to our chinuch really inspired us. It gave us a starkheit being a yid, a starkheit of being a chassid, a starkheit of our emunah. These yisoides, which are our entire ashkafas achayim, were all miyusim and we all nurtured in Toronto.
I merited to be there at the inception of the yeshiva when it first moved into its current facility, and now Yeshivas Lubavitch Toronto is preparing to enter phase 2.0, to take the next leap, to open new horizons. Please support this bold initiative.
Wusse da $1 macht von einem Zdocke und geht das ab auf eine Yeshiva und auf eine Schule und auf eine Leid.
Yeshua began of all Vaya Yeshua began of all Vaya Yeshua began of all.
Okay. That's it?
Yeah. Chaim.
Chaim Lebracha. On? Chaim Lebracha. How do we translate that practically? Yechida means I'm alone with Eibishter, with Einei Movade. I'm not alone. I see the world. I think about the world. I think about my bank account. I think about how much money my charity campaign is bringing in while I'm FARBRENGEN. That's what we think about. So, first of all, we have to translate it simply. We each have to find by ourselves in the basic amudim, in Teira, Avodah, in Milas Chasadim, in our learning Chassidus, and our learning Nigla, in our davening, in our Avodas Atfila, in our Avas Yisrael, in our Afatzas Hamayanis Chutza, each person in his shlichus. We have to find where there's the clash. We always have a clash between what the Eibishter wants me to do and what I want to do. And the clash is sometimes what the Eibishter wants me to do and what I want to do is Kerchek Mizrach Mimayrav. And sometimes it's what I want to do is what the Eibishter wants me to do also, but what the Eibishter really, really wants me to do, oh, das Monzach, a Hacheretach. And it goes, there's a story, when they would come back, the different shluchim to Russia, so a lot of time would be spent showing the Rebbe videos, pictures from Russia. So there's one story, it's not really a story that but these days, all these Habbolas aren't really there. Once when I was teaching in Litera, and we were learning Ksubis, and a Bacher comes over to me, American Bacher, he says, and they were learning the Gemara, Pesach, Pesach. He says, I don't understand. Mela, we're Bachrim. We could handle this stuff. We could learn this stuff. But how do the old Chassidim with white beards, how do they learn Gemaras like this? I don't understand. Okay, so Akapanim. So the Rebbe was watching the picture. Someone was in the office showing the Rebbe pictures from Russia. One of the pictures was a picture of a group of children playing ball in the park. There was a few pictures from the game. Jewish children. That says the Rebbe would get pictures of every single facet of Jewish life in Russia, every aspect. So that was one of the pictures. The Rebbe looks at the pictures, a few pictures, and the Rebbe points to one kid, and he says, one child in Russia. He says, wow, Azat Eidel Lekind, Azat Eidel Lekind, Azat Eidel Lepanim. The Rebbe repeats a few times, Azat Eidel Lepanim. And the Rebbe looked through the rest of the pictures, and then he went back, he wanted to see again this picture, and is again the Rebbe's Azat Eidel Lepanim. Very unusual. So obviously they very, very much wanted to find out what's behind that. Who's this child? Who's this kid that the Rebbe saw fit to comment on a few times? Yesh Devarim B'go, yeah, there's something. So they researched and they found out the background of the story. What was the background of the story? There was a Russian couple, and they started becoming Balei Tshuva. That was happening then. They started becoming Balei Tshuva. Becoming Balei Tshuva, so one of the things they learned about was Taras HaMishpacha. So, Taras HaMishpacha. So the husband and wife learned fine. They can't be together until she goes to the mikveh. So they found a mikveh lady who's going to take her to the mikveh. What's the mikveh at that time? Was the port. seafront. It was the winter, and the one who was going to take her was a former mikveh lady who had been a mikveh lady, and the mikveh lady was also taking a big risk to take her there. But finally, they made up a time, they made up a night, and the mikveh lady takes her there. And the Russian lady goes into the sea. As she's going in, a car drives by. So they ran out. They got terrified. They ran out. They panicked and they ran out. She got dressed and afterwards the mikveh lady tells her, "I think you tevel, but I'm not sure if you tevel." After all of this, so she waited another few months till she had another opportunity to go to the mikveh. And this boy was born from them, from that Russian couple. That was the boy that they ever said, as Aidel Panim was this boy. But was it the Maisa? Sometimes there's, I'm doing what the Eibishter wants. She went to the mikveh, and the mikveh lady said, "You probably tevel. You're already, what more do you want from me? I had Mesiras Nefesh. But it's not Yechida. Yechida, figure out, by you, Sof Kol Sof, there's you and there's the Eibishter. There's always the Yechida, there's always that chance, that opportunity for Mesiras Nefesh, where I'm completely batal Ritzaynecha Mepnei Ritzaynai, where I completely forget and disregard myself, and it's only was will the Eibishter for me. When I have that mindset, I'll find in everything, in every Avodah, in learning Chassidus, in learning Nigla, in davening, in Avos Yisrael, I'll find by everything the area where I could put this into practice of doing that extra thing that I'm doing only because it's Yechida L'Yachtach, because I'm completely committing myself and dedicating myself to the Eibishter. In order for us to bring this into practicality, every single one of us has to find in all of these areas, of course, to increase in learning, of course, to increase in davening, of course, to increase in Avos Yisrael, in Shlichus, in Afatzas Hamayan Ischutza. But more than that, where's your act of Yechida? Where's my act of Yechida? Where's my area where I could identify and discover in my life that I could justify myself, I could defend myself, I could do a certain practice and pat myself on the back. But if I want to know what's really what the Eibishter wants, what's purely Eibishter, there is Yechida. To learn Chassidus in a way that's purely the way the Eibishter wants Yechida. To learn Nigla in a way that's Yechida. To daven in a way that's Yechida. We daven, everyone davens every day, and we pay the Eibishter his dues, we daven. Nein, a daven was to vergesst auf sich, that you forget about what's comfortable for you, or what's convenient for you, or what's needed by you, and what works for you. Und du trachst, und du machst a cheshbon how you give yourself over completely to the Eibishter. And the same thing in every single area. That's mikemu v'chem adavar tali. That's what we're told to do. That's what we're empowered to do. That's what we're given the keches of. And that's the only way that we could bring this to a further step, to a new yechidus, to a new stage, to a new avodah, that we're continuing to develop, we're continuing to move forward. And this yechida, our avodah, every chassid is able to do this. Every chassid is able to do more. The Rebbe is waiting for us, the Eibishter is waiting for us, and all of the generations of Yidden from the Bria Sa'ilam are waiting for us, because they're powerless, and they need us to finish off the mission for them and to finish off the job for them. All of them are waiting for us. That by us should be this yechida, this avodah of yechida, this avodah of yechida l'yachtach, the avodah of yechidas. And with this avodah, with our Mesiras Nefesh, v'minuftan, will bring about the nitzchenes, just like the nitzchenes that were by Yomim Oheim Bizman Hazeh, will bring about a Biyomim Ha'elu, the Yeshuas B'Keref Ha'aretz, the Yeshuas of the Alter Rebbe, the Yeshuas of Rabbi Seinu Yisiyenu, the Yeshuas that come from the Gilui that they gave us, that they gifted us, the Gilui of Yiddishkeit, of Chassidishkeit, of Getlichkeit in the world, until it should be Begoli in the entire world, in every Pina Nidachas, that Havaya Hu Elikim Eined Movade, L'chaim, 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 L'bracha, should be by everyone, B'suris, Teves, L'samchis, B'teva, Nirev, Anigla, B'gashmis, B'ruchnis. L'chaim, 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 L'bracha.
Mazel tov to the yeshiva, Rabbi Wagner, 25 years. Wow!
Everyone can risken von sich, weglegen sich, we have our sich, we can das ein bisschen weglegen auf our Zeit, and then becomes clear, then becomes visible, then that means as alzes alakos, we realize it, and we recognize it, and we could acknowledge it, and know it, and bring it into our day-to-day life. Chaim l'chaim.
And
I stopped what I was doing, traveling to give a share, to share with you something very important. Rabbi Akiva Wagner, my Yidid Nefesh, I've come to know very personally, and also has been very kind to our mishpacha, and my children learned over there to please stop what you're doing and see how much you can do and share and give and help support Rabbi Akiva's yeshiva. It's an amazing yeshiva. That you should be given. I stopped what I was doing, traveling to give a share, to share with you something very important. Rabbi Akiva Wagner, my Yidid Nefesh, I've come to know very personally, and also has been very kind to our mishpacha, and my children learned over there to please.
25 years ago, the Rebbe guided the footsteps of myself and my family to Toronto. Since then, every day, every hour that we were able to spend in Toronto was the biggest incomparable schus, the greatest privilege. If this cause is important for you, if being a part of the tremendous work of the yeshiva is important for you, then the Eibishter will help you find the money for that also, and you'll be able to be a part in this.
Mazel tov to the yeshiva, Rabbi Wagner, 25 years. Wow!
25 years ago, the Rebbe guided the footsteps of myself and my family to Toronto to rebuild the yeshiva. Since then, any small part that we were able to play in the tremendous results that we were able to witness over the years. Bachrim and learning Torah, Bachrim growing in their Chassidishkeit was the biggest incomparable schus.
There's always a part of my neshama and my heart that's in Yeshivas Lubavitch, Toronto. Those years had a dramatic impact on my personal life and obviously in the way I deal with my Talmidim.
The halls and the rooms of the yeshiva are places where lives are changed, lives are formed, where minds and hearts are molded, where Torah, where Yiras Shamayim, and where the Rebbe comes to life.
The Gemara tells us that when the great tzaddik Rabbi Akiva came home, he met his wife, and his Talmidim didn't know who she was, and they wanted to push her away. And he told his Talmidim that my Torah and your Torah is really her Torah, her schus. In all honesty and fully from me'omek halev, I want to say to our Rabbi Akiva that my Torah and the Torah of our Talmidim and their Hatzlacha, it's really all his.
If ze haben a day, was so was mir soll tun mit Geld, was kann a wegen nach verschiedene Sachen, sollen sie machtig sein, verschließen und tun aus, was hängt ab und sie. Als Getimo, bewaschene Hamedine Priority, soll gehen nach Education, wenn wir uns das da nach Erziehen. In Niedigkeit, in Emes-Niedigkeit, was sieht.
The chinuch that I got by Rabbi Wagner, dedication and care that each individual offered. And this is something that I try on a daily basis to impart in my community.
We have to move on and provide for the Bachrim, Bigashmis and Beruchnis, the proper setting and the proper atmosphere for them to continue the amazing and unimaginable growth that we have witnessed until now. That should go to new scales and new dimensions.
When we give tzedakah today, it will help the yeshiva go on to do the much needed renovations, and definitely will be an added schus to bring a refuah shlema to our yeshiva, which will further continue to teach us and farbrengen with us and bring the yeshiva to new levels.
His total dedication, devotion to our chinuch really inspired us. It gave us a starkheit being a yid, a starkheit of being a chassid, a starkheit of our emunah. These yisoides, which are our entire ashkafas achayim, were all miyusim and we all nurtured in Toronto.
I merited to be there at the inception of the yeshiva when it first moved into its current facility, and now Yeshivas Lubavitch Toronto is preparing to enter phase 2.0, to take the next leap, to open new horizons. Please support this bold initiative.
A wusse do a dollar macht von dem Zdokje und geht das ab auf a Yeshiva und auf a Schule und auf a Leid.